Today, we are breaking down the 1970s oil crisis. This was a moment that didn't just create long lines at the gas pump. No, it completely redrew the map of global power and changed, well, pretty much everything about the way we live. I mean, it sounds like the plot of some disaster movie, right? But in the 1970s, this wasn't some hypothetical question. For millions of people across the industrialized world, it became a sudden and very harsh reality. All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll set the stage, how the world got so hooked on oil in the first place. Then we'll dive into the two huge shocks that hit, what that actually meant for everyday life, and finally, the massive legacy that we're still dealing with today. So, to really get why this crisis was so huge, you have to picture the world before it all went down. It was a world happily running on what seemed like an endless supply of really, really cheap oil. And this right here, this shows you the heart of the problem. You had the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, controlling about half of the entire world's oil. That gave a very small group of nations an incredible amount of leverage over, well, everyone else. Just think about it for a second. The whole post-war American dream. The big cars, the houses in the suburbs, the booming factories. All of it was built on a foundation of cheap oil that came from halfway across the world. It created unbelievable prosperity, but it also created this hidden and, as it turns out, incredibly dangerous dependence. Okay, so let's get to the first big event. This is where we see how that vulnerability was suddenly and dramatically used against the West. This is really where politics and petroleum collided with an absolutely explosive force. So the trigger? It was the Yom Kippur War. When the United States sent military aid to help Israel, the Arab members of OPEC decided to retaliate. They unleashed what they literally called the oil weapon and slapped a complete embargo on the US and its allies. Just like that, the tap was twisted shut. Before the crisis, this is what a barrel of oil cost: $3. It was the lifeblood of the global economy, and it was dirt cheap. But in just a few short months, boom, the price quadrupled. Now, this wasn't a gradual price hike. This was a vertical jump that sent these massive shockwaves through every single part of the global economy. And this chart just lays it out perfectly. A 400% increase in the price of the world's most critical commodity in a matter of months. I mean, nobody had ever seen an economic shock quite like this. The reaction back home was immediate, and it affected everybody. The government suddenly put a national speed limit of 55 miles per hour on all highways to save fuel. Some states even tried rationing gas. You could only buy it on certain days depending on if your license plate ended in an odd or even number. The American way of life was forced to change, practically overnight. So just when the world was kind of starting to get used to this new reality, wham! A second, totally different kind of crisis hit, and it delivered another devastating punch to the global economy. See, this time it wasn't a coordinated political move by a cartel. This was just pure chaos. The Islamic Revolution in Iran overthrew the government, and the country's massive oil production, we're talking 5 million barrels a day, just ground to a halt as the nation basically plunged into turmoil. And then, believe it or not, it got even worse. The Iran-Iraq War broke out, turning the Persian Gulf into an active war zone. You had oil terminals literally on fire, and tankers were terrified to go anywhere near the area. Even more oil just vanished from the world market, which only made the global recession deeper. So get this, by 1980, oil prices had more than doubled again. They'd reached heights that nobody had ever imagined were possible, and the economic pain was about to get a whole lot worse. Okay, so let's talk about what all these huge geopolitical events actually felt like for regular people. Because this wasn't just about numbers on some trader's screen. This was about daily life getting completely turned on its head. I mean, the image everyone remembers is the line for gas, right? Stretching for blocks, people waiting for hours and hours, some even sleeping in their cars overnight. All of a sudden, those big American gas guzzlers were a huge problem, and sales of small, fuel-efficient cars from Japan and Germany just exploded. This whole crisis even seeped into our culture, feeding those post-apocalyptic fears you saw in movies like Mad Max. Economically, the crisis created this monster that nobody had ever really dealt with before. They called it stagflation. Now, here's the thing. The old economic theories said that high inflation and high unemployment weren't supposed to happen at the same time. But here they were, both rising together, totally defying the models and leaving politicians just scratching their heads, trying to figure out what to do. And this quote, wow, it just perfectly captures the mood of the country. There was this real feeling of anxiety, this sense that a whole era of endless American prosperity had just come to a sudden, grinding halt. The dream really did feel like it was running out of gas. So the worst part of the crisis did eventually end. New oil sources came online, and the super high prices eventually made people use less. But it left behind a world that was permanently and profoundly changed. And what's really fascinating is to see how different countries responded to make sure they'd never be this vulnerable again. The US went looking for new oil fields and created a massive emergency oil reserve. France went all in on nuclear power. And Japan, which has almost no natural energy of its own, basically became the world champion of energy efficiency. So in the end, yeah, it was incredibly painful, but the crisis was also the wake-up call the world desperately needed. It forced this fundamental change in how we think about energy, and it kicked off the first real global push towards conservation, efficiency, and finding different ways to power our world. You know, this whole story is a powerful reminder of just how fragile our energy systems really are. And it leaves us with a pretty big question that's just as relevant today as it was 50 years ago.